He spent 2 years as a senior research officer for the International Labor Organization in Geneva, Switzerland. He is the author or editor of half a dozen books on econometrics, development theory, capital theory, and the crisis of neoliberalism. One of these included a chapter that became the principal citation for Daniel McFadden's Nobel Prize in Economics. Zarembka has been since 1977 the general editor of the monograph series Research in Political Economy, publishing work typically from a Marxist perspective. He has held the Fulbright Teaching Award at the Academy of Economics, Poznan, Poland. Please pardon my pronunciation if that is incorrect. He is editor of The Hidden History of 9/11, first edited by Elsevier Press, 2008, expanded edition by Seven Stories Press. Paul Zarembka will now present his analysis of evidence of insider trading before 9/11. Professor Zarembka will present for 45 minutes, followed by questions from the panelists. Please help me welcoming Professor Paul Zarembka.
Thank you very much for inviting me to make this presentation. I am going to try and make it as simple as possible, but it's not a simple topic. Basically, I'm going to be talking about a contradiction between the United States government's report and econometrics, the science of econometrics, which I'm quite familiar with. And I'm going to try and explain these econometric findings that establish insider trading before 9/11. It is not the only financial question. It's only one of financial questions about 9/11. You can decide for yourself whether you think this is of high importance or medium importance or whatever you think, okay? However, the 9/11 Commission report did deal briefly with the issue of insider trading, so they have an answer to the allegations made that there was substantial insider trading before 9/11. Let me make a comment to begin about what insider trading is. Insider trading is taking advantage of knowledge that you have privately. It's not public information. It's private information that you have about a forthcoming event, and you engage in some kind of financial transaction which will enable you to profit from that forthcoming event that other people don't know about, okay? So insider trading in this particular case would be having knowledge of 9/11 ahead of time, and I'm going to be explaining what you do, okay? There's various things you could do, but I'm going to focus on one thing that you could do in order to make profits for yourself from the forthcoming event. Sometimes insider trading is called informed trading. It's you see it both ways. I a little bit prefer the reference to insider trading, particularly for this topic, okay? Because it's not just I eavesdropped on some kind of news or some kind of information about what was going to happen, but I wasn't a participant or in any way whatsoever. I just happened to find out about it and didn't tell anybody, and then did some financial transactions to make money. That would be informed trading and not really inside. I mean, it would be encompassing insider trading, but insider trading is a little bit narrower description that you're in on it. And that's the way the financial press reported it right after 9/11. Now let me explain what I mean by it being reported. And later I'm going to tell you what exactly they were reporting on, but right now I'm just reporting what was happening. For about 1 month after 9/11, 2001, there was reports in mainstream financial press of huge profits being made on the 9/11 event by foreknowledge of the events, okay? That was that was statements being made, and some of them referred to billions of dollars being made. One of the key statements being made referred to using put options. So I have to describe put options in the early part of my discussion. And I'm only going to be talking about this particular instrument to make gains on financially. Only I'm going to talk about this thing called put options, because that's the thing that had the attention for 1 month, including major financial publications like Barron's. And it's the only thing that was answered in the 9/11 Commission report. There is a lot of other things out there, but it's a very defined topic that I'm dealing with today.
I just have to make a comment. The noise you're hearing, and that's a bit disruptive, we're looking into it. There seems to be some work being done, and so that banging, we're just going to have to tolerate it for a bit longer. Beg pardon, Professor. But as you speak, do make use of the microphone, and we'll see if we can talk it down. Thank you.
Thank you. So now let me give a pictorial representation of where I'm going. We have 3 econometric studies, one of which was published 5 years ago, the second of which was published just a few months ago, and the third of which is not even submitted for publication, but will be submitted very shortly. These are done by econometricians addressing the issue about whether there could be insider trading or informed trading before 9/11. Note that the Podesman paper from 2006 is published in the most, if you want to put it that way, bourgeois capitalist publication possible, okay? The Journal of Business, okay? It has a high reputation. It does no questions about, the peer reviewing process. I am an editor myself. I would just tell you how I do peer reviewing of papers that come to me for publication. I try and get, when I see a paper come in, I try and get one person to review it who I know will be positively disposed, or I suspect will be positively disposed, and a second person who I think will be negatively disposed, okay, or maybe negatively disposed, because if the negatively disposed person is positive, that's a really strong evidence to publish, okay, and if the positively disposed person is negative, that's pretty good evidence that this paper needs more work or should be rejected altogether, okay. I'm just saying that the process of peer reviewing itself is not, you don't just say peer reviewing and that's the end of the ball game. There's peer reviewing and there's peer reviewing. Okay. This Journal of Business has a very high reputation, whether it's deserved or not, I don't know, whatever. I mean, if you want to put it another way, it's from my point of view, it's their outlet, okay? The same thing is true with a multinational finance journal, okay? It's not as well established, but it's very well established still. The third one is not submitted yet, but I'll address that shortly. Now, the 9/11 Commission report has one sentence and one long footnote addressing the issue of insider trading, and they say that yes, there was these claims of insider trading after 9/11, that they were exaggerations, and it's understandable exaggerations, but we checked everything out. We had 40 people making these investigations, and we found that there was no evidence of financial trading. They literally said there's no evidence of financial insider trading before 9/11. And they didn't do this just with the question that I am going to deal with about put options. They also dealt with other questions, which I will mention a little bit. But they were mostly concerned about what I will be talking about. So I'm going to confront the government today. And now you may be surprised. I don't know what expectations you have when you came in here. If you had read my article and my chapter in the hidden history of 9/11, you probably will think that I will be saying that there was insider trading in American Airlines and United Airlines stocks before 9/11. Watch and see if you find confirmation of me saying that as we get toward the end, okay? So we have on the screen 3 scientific works. This third one, Chesney, I'm going to take it as if it were published because, I mean, it's really serious work. They have 3 people working on it. 2 of the 3 are professors of finance in Zurich. It's just the reason it's not published yet is that they have expanded their work, and now, as I will be describing, and they just took time to get it ready. It's been about 4 years they've been working on it. They're very serious researchers. Anyway, so what I'm going to be basically saying is that there's a contradiction between the scientific work and what the 9/11 Commission report states. But I'm going to be doing that not just on what the Commission report openly stated it was available to you in 2004, but they have now released several memos that were written to the 9/11 Commission or provided to the 9/11 Commission, which explains why they said what they said. Okay? In other words, it's part of this process of releasing documents that were previously secret, no longer making them secret. Okay? And that leads to a kind of a surprise. Okay? So I'm going to be dealing with this contradiction, and I'm going to tell you at the end that I cannot solve the contradiction, but I'm going to suggest how to go forward to solve the contradiction. Now, I have on the screen a list of things that are not being discussed, and I think I'm obligated to say so. Because there is really other important issues that need to be dealt with, which are financial questions. For one thing, there is reports from somebody who was working in the area that there is huge increases in the M1 money supply in July and August of 2001, which is unexplained. There is commentary about huge financial transactions that are reported to have taken place at the computers at the World Trade Center, downloading of huge transactions in the minutes before the attacks occurred. Okay, these are people who were there, who reported those events. Okay, the 9/11 Commission report did not address this in any way that I know about. There's also something I'm not going to talk about today, but I'll explain it just for one moment, and that's selling stocks short. For those of you that don't know, and probably most of you don't know what selling short means, selling short says, if I go to American Airlines or United Airlines and I know, or at least I highly suspect that the stock price is going to go down, there's financial companies which will loan you the stock, you sell it, and then you buy it back later. Okay, you borrowed it, you have to buy it and give it back. Okay, that's short selling. You can make money on short selling by selling a borrowed stock and returning it at a later date if the price goes down. So in these cases, in the images here for American Airlines and United Airlines, that's a method you could make money if you knew the event was going to happen. I am not going to be dealing with that today, but the government says it checked it out, but I'm not going to be dealing with it because they gave me no evidence of what they did about checking that out. I'm not doing anything about markets outside the United States. There is evidence, there's a lot of discussion about gold and securities that were at the World Trade Center, which have disappeared. They don't know where they went to. I'm not going to discuss that. I'm not going to discuss, which I think is actually very interesting evidence, to look at exactly which of the floors of the World Trade Centers actually had the planes coming into them, which firms were there, and why it might have been that the planes hit exactly those floors. Is it totally an accident that the planes hit exactly those floors? And what was on those floors? Okay, so that I'm not dealing with. The same thing is true about the Pentagon. I mean, it's not, is it an accident about where whatever happened at the Pentagon happened, okay? And that has huge financial implications also. I'm not dealing with that. I'm also not dealing with Larry Silverstein. I think that one you probably most people know about, that he acquired the lease on the World Trade Centers 1 through 6, like 6 weeks before 9/11, with insurance coverage for that and no obligation on his part if something happened, and he already owned World Trade Center 7. So I'm not dealing with that either. That's actually a little bit more well known. So that's what I'm not doing. So now let's go to the what I am doing. Put options. I have to explain now what a put option is, and I'm going to explain some other things which are not so easy to understand, I guess. Okay. A put option is kind of like this short selling I was telling you about, okay? But it's not the same, so I have to describe it. It's in the so-called option markets, okay? You don't actually purchase a stock, you don't sell a stock or anything like that. You purchase an option to do something with a stock. You purchase the option for a specific period of time to be able to, in the case of a put option, to be able to put the stock for sale at a specified price in the, let's say, the next 6 weeks. I'm not choosing 6 weeks by random because for the stocks that we're going to be talking about, most of the transactions had an expiration of October 20th of 2001. In other words, it's about 6 weeks later. So let me explain that again, okay? I'm not going to be dealing only with American and United, but whatever stock I'm dealing with, I'm mostly going to be referring to the option of selling these stocks, let's say, by any time before October 20th at the designated put price. For example, and again, I'm putting this on the screen on the right-hand side. It so happens that American stock and United stock had almost the same price, just by accident, before 9/11, namely around $30. If you knew that 9/11 was going to happen on September 3rd, 4th, or whatever, you could go to a financial firm and buy a option to sell United or American stock. Let's say, I mean, there's options. You don't have to say $30, but I'm being simple now. You buy the option to sell that stock for, let's say, $30 anytime until October 20th. And you know, or you think you know, that the stock is going to go down. When it comes to, let's say, September 16th or 18th or whatever, okay, you can decide to buy the stock, if you don't already have it. You buy American Airlines, and the same day, same hour, same second, you sell it. You're buying it, if you're looking at the screen now, you're buying it at under $20, and you had that option to sell it at $30. You made $10 per share. Everybody understands? I mean, I can't. I don't want to ask you raising your hands, but I'm hoping that everybody understands that point. Okay, that's what engaging in put options is about. And there are other things you can do. It's complicated. I'm going to try and stay simple. Okay, and that's where most yes.
To interrupt, so you are entitled in a put option to sell at $30, but is anyone obligated to buy at $30?
Yes.
If the stock is trading at $20.
You bought this transaction from somebody called a market maker. The market maker is obligated to sell you that stock at that price. That's the obligation on his or her part to having sold you the option in the first place. You have the right to sell 10,000 shares at $30.
And he
With
is
that,
obligated to
yeah,
buy.
that's his contractual obligation. Yes, yes, that's right. Okay. Now, so that's the first thing. Except that I have to say that $30 is what we call the strike price. Just that's the I'm sorry, that's the expression. Okay, that's called the strike price, and there's an expiration like October 20, maybe it's 22nd. Okay, actually I think it's October 20th, but it doesn't matter. Okay, the reason why I say there is only well-defined days where there's expirations. It isn't like every day of the week. It's like once a month, and it's a well-defined for all options. All of them are the same day of the month, and maybe the 20th or the 22nd. Open interest. Now, this is one of the harder things to understand. I was just talking to this Professor Chesney, who is from Zurich, who I'm going to be referring to later, and he reports the same thing that I'm going to tell you now. This is one of the harder things for you to understand. He has the same experience when he tries to describe what open interest is. Open interest tells you at the end of a day or in the middle of the day or whatever of how many contracts there are out there for a specific strike price for a specific expiration day. How many contracts? In other words, it tells you basically the total commitment, and we have the data is there. We have the total commitment that's people are obligated for. By the way, I should mention that buying put options cost you money itself, of course, right? I mean, it's not free. It might cost you $1. It might cost you $2. I mean, I don't want to get into it, except it's just make a few remarks as we go along, okay? So the open interest tells you what is at stake at the end or the middle of the day. I'm going to say at the end of the day. And the level of open interest changes from three factors. First of all, people buying put options. That's obvious. That's what I've already described. You buy a put option. But you can also sell a put option. I could buy a put option. You could say, I want it. You could pay me a price and I'll sell it to you. That's a sale of a put option, okay? Unfortunately, the data, most of us, that's publicly available, doesn't tell you the difference between my buying a put option and you're selling the put option. It will describe a sale in the same way it describes a purchase of a put option. So unless you have the confidential data, you can't know that. There's much less sales typically than purchases, so most of it is purchases, but nevertheless, it's not clean data without knowing how much sales are taking place. But there's another complication, and that is that you can also exercise the put option. In other words, if I bought a put option on American Airlines on September 4th, I can decide, I made a mistake. I mean, it's going to go the wrong way or whatever. And I can decide on September 7th to exercise the option. On September 7th, I think American might have been slightly below, maybe slightly below $30, and maybe I get out of this situation. That's exercising option. That means that open interest now will decline at the end of the day. So the second and third papers I'm going to deal with, the second and third papers deal with the change in open interest. The first paper actually has the confidential data of the actual purchases that I said were necessary. And that raises a point that I want to mention. Why did Podesman, professor of finance at the University of Illinois Champaign-Urbana, get this data? And the answer, I think, is that the Chicago Board of Options Exchange actually wanted to see whether we can do research work to actually identify informed or insider trading before or after it happens and prosecute when it happens. I think that there was a scientific question that they were happy to have Podesman address. All three of these people that I know about, I mean, these three people, to the best of my knowledge, are not 9/11 quote truthers. Okay, they are academics doing their job. Okay, I know from talking to Professor Chesney that even in Europe, people are shy about dealing with his work because it's controversial. Okay, but I don't hear from him that he's a person who's focused on 9/11. In fact, his paper focuses on more questions than about 9/11, but other informed or insider trading that has occurred. Actually, slightly more other cases, and I'll get to that as I get to my discussion. Okay, I see already that I'm going to run out of time if I spend too much time describing what their research actually is, but I'll do the best I can. And let me skip over the volume of options transactions. It's connected to the change in open interest, but not exactly the same because you have to account for exercising and sales, as I have kind of mentioned. The next concept I have to mention is quintel. Okay, a quintel tells you if you have a random event and so you have a distribution of a current. Think of a bell curve. Most of you know what a bell curve is. Okay, so put in your mind a bell curve. A quintel will tell you how much of whatever variable you are investigating has occurred up to a certain point. For example, a quintel of 95 would tell you that 95 out of 100 or 19 out of 20 occurrences of that event would already have taken place when you got to that point in the distribution. So that would say that there's a 5% cases that haven't yet occurred. Likewise, a quintel of 99 tells you that 99 out of 100 cases have already occurred and a 1 is yet to come. Okay? Last concept I want to mention is hedging, which also becomes relevant for this discussion. Sometimes a finance person will say, well, they'll be not sure that, for example, they will buy a stock. And they buy the stock, or they advise their clients to buy the stock because they expect the stock price to go up. But they want to be cautious. So they also buy an option to hedge against being wrong. Okay, so that's what it is. Okay, hedging is buying an option. Typically, it's buying an option to guard against your being wrong, and sometimes that can be worthwhile doing, even if you are pretty sure about where things are going. Okay, the next screen I have up here, I like to read this because Podesman, who did the first article discussing insider trading in 9/11, before 9/11, he did it fundamentally mostly on American and United Airlines, but not exclusively, describes what we're doing. He says, option market activity is motivated by a number of factors such as uninformed speculation. So if I engage in option trading, I don't know what I'm doing. Okay, so I would be speculating. I would speculate the stock market is going to go down the next 3 weeks, so I buy a put option in anticipation of that. But I'm not an insider. I don't have any particular knowledge anybody else in there. It's my speculation. So that's noise trading. Hedging which I've just described. Trading on public knowledge. What is trading on public knowledge? You find out that the company, American Airlines, is going to have an unanticipated loss, and it's reported in the press, has an unanticipated loss, and that leads to people going into the stock market and the option market to buy or sell or whatever. That's trading on public information. But what we're dealing with is trading on private information. In other words, information that people don't know except the people who are kind of inside or somehow captured the information. Consequently, when a statistic obtains a value that is extreme relative to its historical distribution, now that's where you kind of get to the issue of quintil. You're looking for extreme events. When it's extreme relative to its historical distribution, one can infer that there is an unusual amount of activity related to one or more of the option trading motivations that I've just described. Although the statistics do not distinguish between the trading motivations, if an extreme value occurs just before an important piece of news becomes public, then it is reasonable to infer that there is an option market trading based upon private information rather than a shock to the trading from one of the other motivations. Now, that's a fundamental point that sort of is driving things forward here, okay? In fact, when I come to the end, and I hope I have enough time to get to the Chesney paper, we really see it in stark colors with Chesney's paper more than any other. So now I'm going to move and discuss the three papers one by one and the contradiction with the government. So let me start with the first. That's his picture of the guy. Okay, but apart from that, this is a reproduction of the article that appears in the Journal of Business. This is it. Okay, right here. Now, let me just comment that this article was actually available before the 9/11 Commission report was published. Even though it was published in 2006, there's a long lag time between it's being accepted and it's being published. And I would think that if the 9/11 Commission report were responsible, they would have known that this investigation was taking place, and they would have touched base and found out what the results were, and you would have seen it in the 9/11 Commission report. So the fact that the 2004 Commission report is 2 years before the publication of this doesn't mean that it wasn't available. In fact, I think David Griffin saw it way back in 2004, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, the pre-draft. Now I'm going to try and describe what he does, and I'm only doing it in four bullets here to try and make it simple. All of these papers are not so simple. I'm trying to do the simplest description I can of all four papers. First of all, he looks at the change in the open interest, and I'm going to focus on American and United stocks. He looks at the change in open interest on American and United stocks for a very short period, September 5th to December 10th. September 5th would be, what, a Tuesday, and September 10th would be the Monday before September 11th. He chose that because he had read some newspaper reports or something or other that bin Laden said something around September 4th, and therefore that led him to believe that September 5th was a key day. The next papers I'm going to talk about don't focus on this particular window of days, but that's his focus. And he looks at the change in open interest, which I've told you about, for those 4 trading days, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 10th. Saturday and Sunday being this 5th and whatever it is, 8th and 9th, okay, that are not trading days. So he's looking at 4 trading days, looking at the change in open interest for those days. He compares that with a benchmark period of 126 trading days before that to see whether they are unusual for that stock. And now we go to even the more dramatic part. He actually looks at that and compares those data, those 4 pieces of data for each of these companies, and therefore 8 pieces of data. He compares it to 1,000 pieces of data on the 1,000 largest corporations between January 2nd, 1990 to September 4th, 2001 to get this frequency distribution I was referring to, and therefore to be able to get this idea of where the quintiles are for the transactions that are occurring in put options for American and United Airlines. He finds, now I'm just go to the answer. The answer is that result would only have occurred on September 10th for American Airlines 1% of the time. There was 99 out of 100 cases you would not have seen on September 10th what you actually did observe on September 10th. He inferred from that that was evidence of informed or insider trading on American Airlines on September 10th. That's perhaps the most important thing I can say about him. It doesn't say certainty. It says it's a very rare thing that happened on September 10th, and therefore the implication is check it out. Okay? For United Airlines, it's similar, but not as dramatic. It's a 4% probability. I have a comment down here that he actually goes further than that, but I just want to say simple. And he also uses some other method. He doesn't have just one methodology. I'm focusing on the methodology he prefers.
Professor Lee, could you use the microphone,
Yes.
please?
Just for the benefit of us non-economists, is another way of phrasing this that the person who took the put options was analogous to betting on 100-to-1 shot at the track. Say there's a horse that's the odds on this horse are 100-to-1, but I know something, so I'm going to put all my dough on that. I'm just trying to understand it in layman's terms.
I don't think that works too well, because what we're talking about is what's going to happen. What we're saying is that, yes, it's on a random event basis, it could have happened, that what did happen, extreme events are part of the distribution of probabilities always.
Right.
So what happened on that particular day could have been a 1 in 100 event.
Someone could say, gee, I just took a lucky chance on a horse.
Okay, let me just implicitly, I will be answering that answer by the next thing I'm going to say. Okay. Now we get to the 9/11 Commission report, because the 9/11 Commission report, and I'm not going to read it. I'm just going to say what it said. Okay. The 9/11 Commission report says it did a careful investigation of what I've just been talking about, namely insider trading in put options on American Airlines and on United Airlines. Okay? And it says for these two stocks before 9/11, we found no evidence of insider trading, in spite of the fact that it seems to be suspicious. Why did they do that? Well, I'm telling you, first of all, what we read in 2004. What we read in 2004 is we checked it out, and we are able to explain it. But they didn't tell you too much about how they explained it, particularly on American, which is the more interesting case. So some of us, David Ray Griffin and myself, for example, okay, basically threw this out, threw the 9/11 Commission report's statement in a trash can because there's no evidence. They didn't release the evidence of what they found. They just made an assertion. So why should I pay any attention to an assertion? And in January of around middle of January of 2009, the document that was behind this statement of the 9/11 Commission report comes out. And that's where we get now to the contradiction with, I mean, now explicit contradiction, not just fuzzy stuff, which is what they did before. We get a release of a report that's this guy Sella made to the 9/11 Commission, who is, well, he was in charge of the investigation. He makes a report to the 9/11 Commission report, which is not released, but it's what's behind what's in the Commission report. I'm just showing you now the first page. The whole thing looks like this. Inside that, it actually provides. We're not going down a rabbit hole here. When we have evidence that is convincing, we say so, and we go on. Okay. Sella says almost exactly what I would have done if I were an investigator. Okay. Sella says we investigated, and we found out that there was a financial publication called Options Hotline, which on September 9th faxed to its subscribers a recommendation to buy American put options at $30 with an expiration of October 20th or 22nd. A recommendation is being made. Now, the 9/11 Commission report implied that that was going on, but they didn't tell who was the newsletter, who was the editor, no information. It was just one sentence. What Sella does is tells you the name of the guy, named Sharnoff, okay? And the publication is called Options Hotline. It was faxed on September 9th. And furthermore, we found out exactly what the newsletter actually told its subscribers, which in the statement that I've done for this hearings, I report exactly what it was. I've just summarized it. That was obtained by a guy named Mike Williams, who apparently went to the Options Hotline and found out what they actually wrote to their subscribers. Now, how many subscribers do they have? They have 2,000 subscribers. This Sella report doesn't just say who the option editor is and the name of the place, but he also says that they interviewed 27 of the subscribers who said that 25 of the 27 said that they bought the option because the advisor advised them to do so. They don't say the names of the 25 people. I mean, that's confidential information. If I had done it, you can't. But they did what they're supposed to do. Okay. Furthermore, they said that there was another 25, 23, I don't remember exactly, other people who were subscribers to this Options Hotline thing, who also, they have the data on who did the purchases, who also did the purchase. So we have about 50 plus people who were subscribers to the Option Hotline, who either said, or half of whom we said and half of whom we can infer that they did what the Option Hotline recommended they do, and that was purchase the put options on American Airlines on September 10th. And that's the government's, the Sella explanation of why there was a spike in put option trading in American Airlines on September 10th. If you want to make an accusation that Sarnoff was in on it, okay, I'm not going there. If you want to make that accusation, give me evidence. I'm not going there without evidence, okay? And even if I thought that he might be, well, why would he give that information to his subscribers? You'd think he'd want to keep it to himself and make profits for himself and not for his subscribers, okay? Anyway, there's no evidence. This is where you might be surprised, okay? I'm going to accept that. I'm going to accept that the government has found, quote, close to the truth, maybe exactly the truth, about what happened on American Airlines put option trading for September 10th as a result of what happened on September 9th, namely this faxed recommendation. About 4% of the subscribers, 50 out of 2,000, is that 4%? No, that's 2.5%. 2.5% of subscribers did what he recommended, money and throw it in a waste server basket. Or that must happen all the time. I'm going to accept that, okay? This report also reports what happened to United stock, and this is a little bit more. Maybe it's not so worth talking about so much. How much more time do I have? Oh, I only got forget it altogether. Okay, we'll go on to the next one. Okay, maybe you can just look at that. Well, I've said everything. I should have had that screen up. I've said everything that's on the screen right now. I'm going to accept that. That doesn't end the story. Go now to the next paper, which is by this guy Wong and three people. University of Wisconsin, okay, Madison, which is my alma mater for PhD actually. And they did analysis not of American Airlines, United Airlines, but something completely differently. They looked at the S&P 500. S&P 500 is the 500 largest stock companies in the United States that are traded, and most people have heard about it. Okay, the S&P 500. You can do option tradings not in a company. You can do it in an index. So they did a study of the index of the S&P 500, and the paper is probably the most complicated paper in terms of. They even describe how you do option. If you're into it, how you do option trading and then do it one way or another. I just don't. It's not important for this discussion. Okay. But they raised the issue that, hey, if you're really knowing about what's happening in 9/11 ahead of time, you're probably not going to do American Airlines. You're probably not going to do United Airlines. It's too obvious. Okay. You'll do something where you're disguised, and you're disguised for betting. If you want that language, you're disguised betting on the S&P 500. Now, this is really interesting, okay? Because they come to the conclusion that there is evidence of insider trading around the S&P 500 before 9/11. Okay, I'm not going to go through. That's the picture of the guy, and the first guy, and his, whatever. Okay, and I'll have it on the screen. You can look at the screen just for a few. But anyway, they find the evidence, okay, that there is insider trading in the S&P 500 before 9/11. And they also point out, as I just said, that it's the American and United are not the obvious place you would go. This is a more disguised place to go to. And they also, I lost my train of thought here. Something I don't have time to deal with, but I'm not going to put it on the screen. But the government claims it did a thorough investigation. It had 40 people making investigations, and they did a thorough study, and they found no evidence. And they included, when they said that, this is now the 9/11 Commission background papers. When they did it, they said that they included the indexes. Well, there is in the written version of my paper the quote of one of the guys who was doing the investigation, one of the principals, not Sella, a different guy, who said that we found we could not investigate the S&P 500 index because there's too much going on. Okay, so you have the government actually distorted its own statement by a written statement saying we couldn't analyze the S&P 500, and yet we get an analysis of the S&P 500 which shows its insider trading with a high probability, but not certain. Nothing's certain in statistics. Okay. Now, so now I have to go to the Chesney paper, and I'm going to have to do this as fast as I can. It's actually probably the most important one in some ways. First of all, he looks at 14 companies. He doesn't look at just American and United. And he looks at 5 airline companies. He looks at 5 banking companies. He looks at 4 others. And he looks at put option trading for a 10-year period of time. Okay. There's certain glitches, certain aspects of it I just don't have time to summarize. But, okay, so he goes, well, pictures are important. Okay, that's a picture of the 2 of the 3 guys, okay, that I got off the internet. Okay, they're from Zurich. Anyway, so I summarize on the screen right now. Maybe I'm gonna try and leave that on the screen as we probably have about 1 minute left. Okay, I'll leave it on the screen for you to read it. But I want to go to the bottom line here. Is that's numbers. Okay, these are he looks at the data around. Well, let me go back a second. He looks at spikes in put option trading on 14 companies over a 10-year period. And after all the statistical stuff that's summarized here, he finds that there's only 37 cases which are strange. That rise to the surface as being extreme events. Only 37. Okay. 15 minutes? Okay. That's I never had that happen before.
1 out of 100.
Okay, so I can slow down. Okay, so so as I say, all these 3 people actually it's 7 people, but these 3 papers are doing the same. They're doing scientific research. I'm standing here before you as an econometrician, as a scientist, okay, and I'm making a statement about the government failing to follow scientific evidence. But it's not like physical evidence about the World Trade Centers. It's a different kind of evidence. It's evidence about put option trading and that kind of that. But this is evidence, and this is I'm not speculating on something here. I'm only talking about evidence. Okay, so what Chesney does is he looks at 10 years of data on 14 companies, and I'll make a footnote at this point. I talked to the guy a couple of days ago, and he has an elaborated version of the paper now, which is, instead of looking at 1.5 million pieces of data, he's looking at 9 million pieces of data. Okay, and he sent it to me, but I haven't even had a chance to even look at the updated. But that's the one I think he's intending to submit. Put that aside. I'm going to stay with what I know about, namely the earlier version of this paper. So he's looking at 14 companies over 10 years. He does this quintil kind of analysis of probabilities of things occurring. Okay, looking at banking stocks, 4 others, and 5 airline related stocks, 14 in total. So now I can identify a little bit about since I have a little bit more time than I expected, I can tell you a little about what he says. Go to the third one here. First, they identify for each day the put option contract across strike prices. Remember what strike prices are. I won't repeat it. And expiration dates with the largest increment in open interest. Now, that itself is something, okay? I said that there's different expiration dates and there's different strike prices that are available, that are being put on the market by these people called market makers. It amounts to about 54 different possibilities. If I want to play around with American Airlines for this coming October, I can do it. I mean, anyway, you do it. Have fun. You know, you can do it for whatever that expiration date is in October. And they will do it for October. They'll do it for 1 year. 2 years from now, they'll do it for January. You know, there's a whole bunch of different options, and there's different prices, okay, that are available out there. And the total amounts to about 54. So what they do, first of all, is just take, well, which one of all the transactions that occurred had the most activity. That's the third one. So I'm giving a little bit of detail. This leads to a measure QT, which denotes for each day the frequency that such a value occurred based upon, and then they look at the 2-period prior history of that day. They look back 2 years for that stock option over 2 years and see, well, was that particularly unusual or not? For example, American, and they cite American on September 10th had occurred at that level or more only 5 prior times in prior 2 years. In other words, that spike had occurred, but only 5 prior times for American, okay? Then they add on something I'm not going to describe, and that is to try and take account of hedging transactions, which you can't know that exactly. It's a complicated, I mean, you have to infer what might be a hedging transaction, but they try to take account of it. Then the third step they look at is, well, which of these were the most profitable? And actuality, ex post, after it happened, which were the most profitable? Now, so what's the result? They find that there are only 37 in all of that 10-year period for 14 stocks. There's only 37 events to be identified as possibly informed or insider trading, whatever word you prefer to use. Only 37. They're not focusing on 9/11, but it's in the period of 9/11. They find out that there's the 13 of the cases that they find are centered around 9/11. 14 are centered around what turns out to be later a merger or a purchase kind of activity of a company, or some kind of dramatic statement about earnings that are going to come to the company. So, and in fact, they find out that out of the 37 cases, 33 they can identify with a real event that occurs after the purchase of the spike in the purchase option transaction. I have to repeat that because it's really important, okay? They find that this is all done by statistics, okay? So that's why it becomes dramatic. They find out that out of the 37 cases that they are able to identify, 33 out of the 37 actually occurred before a real event, which was realize you're dealing with something prior to an event. So how would you know, unless you have inside information, that event is going to happen? Okay? 33 out of 37 cases have to do with a subsequent event. Only 4 does not have to do with it, that they can identify it as doing with a subsequent event. 13 of the 33 center around 9/11. That's what's on the screen. And then the rest I don't want to talk about, but it's the other things I mentioned. Now, I have to deal with a little bit about what's on the screen because this is really important. Now look at American and look at United. They are not the big profitable ones. And by the way, the numbers we're giving here now are not they're from their work, but they really are not. They don't depend upon the statistics. Okay. If you want to ask me about that, you can ask me about that, panelist. Okay. But anyway, Boeing is 4 times more profitable than American. Okay. And I can go down and talk about the other banking stocks and so forth and so on. But I'm putting out here the maximum gains. Now, probably 5 more minutes. Okay, so I have good time here. So what do I learn from this? And this is now gets interesting. I said that I agree with the government that Sarnoff made its recommendation to its advisors to invest in put options on American Airlines, and I'm going to accept that. But now think about why Sarnoff might have done it without insider information. And actually, there's a possibility that it needs to be investigated, and that is that somebody knew an insider information about Boeing or other or Delta or whatever, which was purchased. Those options were purchased on August 29th and September 5th and 6th. Sarnoff, who's an options advisor, could see, hey, there's big activity going on in airline stocks, particularly Boeing. This is maybe I should advise my clients to purchase put options, and so he does so on September 9th, not knowing anything about insider trading, and yet the people who insider event. So he's following the leader, okay, of somebody who does know what's going to happen. Okay, so the persons who are investing in Boeing. Okay, now, so where does that lead me? It leads me, first of all, to say that just because I said that American and United can be accepted, as the government said, doesn't do very much in favor of the government story, because they haven't told us anything else. They haven't analyzed anything else. So that's one thing. The second thing is I really have to emphasize the defense of econometrics, the defense of science. I mean, these guys who, I'm talking about all 3 papers that we've been talking about, okay, all 3, if they are wrong, if all 3 of these papers, which use different methodologies, if they are wrong in their methodologies, I want to know, I haven't figured it out how they would be, okay? I think it is real evidence that has to be confronted, okay? And just claiming a few, that the American and United can be explained away ain't enough. So my conclusion, which is now pulls me to the end, okay, is I'm now making a recommendation to the panel, okay? Toward a resolution, okay, I accept United and American as not being evidence of direct insider trading. That doesn't mean it's not indirect, as I described a minute ago. It could be indirect, but I'm accepting that Sarnoff, I'm not accusing Sarnoff of anything, if you want to put it bluntly, okay? I made a comment here. The second thing is that what Wong found out is not contradicted by the government, because the government said it couldn't analyze S&P 500. I see, the chair of my economics department has written, I'm not trying to tell a story here, it's just true. I mean, he is in favor of the death penalty, and did an econometric study which eventually appeared before the U.S. Supreme Court supporting the death penalty as a deterrent, okay? It got a lot of controversy. People made a big noise about whether his econometrics was any good or not. He's not exactly an econometrician, but he knows econometrics, okay? That's typically what happens in my profession when you have a controversial result. It didn't happen with POTUS and any of these others. I know of no criticism of these papers. People are either they're scared to even deal with these issues, or they just don't have a reason to be critical. I don't know. It's somebody else's problem. Okay, I'm just telling you that these papers are not contested to the best of my knowledge. Therefore, I accept this econometric research as meritorious, and that's what I'm recommending to the panel. You accept these econometric studies as meritorious, and I make recommendations that first of all, you don't need to have initially a demand for a new investigation, although I'm going to support that also. Just simply demand of the SEC to make the other evidence that they claim to have obtained on Merrill Lynch and Boeing and blah blah blah, make that available in the same way that they made it available for American and United Airlines. Okay, and S&P. Well, we know that they didn't do anything in S&P 500 because they say so. Okay, that's my first recommendation. Okay, demand that, oh, you did the study. Well, show us. You know, the same kind of thing you did for American and United. Okay, and if, and you can make that list just the stocks if you want that Chesney talks about, but Chesney's going to be adding more companies, I believe, to the study, so you can add on those companies also when we get the new paper. So the last two recommendations are promote an independent investigation of the events of September 11th, inclusive of subpoena power, which includes investigations of put option purchasing. I mean, this flows from my paper, like, for example, the Gravel Initiative would be an example of that, which I support, okay? And the last thing I would say is that we go back to what I haven't talked about, that independent investigation include all of these issues not discussed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Zarembka. We'll move to panel questions now. Judge, did you have? Sorry? Okay, please.
Thank you very much, Professor Paul Zarembka. I ask you, should it have been possible through the share trading analysis to establish the precise time or the probable time of the terrorist attack on September 2001? This is the first question. Another question that I can ask you, is it possible to find the stock investors responsible of insider trading of September 11? Should you able to find the unknown investors, theoretically? The third question is, it exists the possibility to establish that purchasing of a put option before September was insider trading and not a simple speculation, which is legal operation. And fourth question is, do you know if the intelligence
I'm gonna get lost on. Let me do the first two and then repeat the third one and the fourth one. Okay. Let me just do the first two first.
Yes.
He asked me first of all whether this kind of evidence would be predictive of the exact timing. I think not, or I think not very precisely. I mean, what all of these researchers are doing is using data that they analyze afterwards and sees how those people, as we know afterwards, must have known something. So it's a retrospective on those people. The second question you asked was whether you can identify the persons. Okay, you certainly can. I mean, all of the traders. The government says so. I mean, we know who made these transactions, okay? Now, there may be a way to do it in an open market way, which I'm not quite familiar with. There may be a way to disguise it that I haven't been exposed to, but basically, yes, you can identify who did the transactions. That should not be a problem. Okay, now you can give me the other two questions.
Thank you. Do you know, please, if the intelligence agency had suddenly access to this information through the software Promise? Are you informed of this? Do you know software Promise? I ask you if...
Oh, the Promise software?
Yes, Promise software.
I don't know anything. I mean, I only know what Michael Rupert talks about Promise software. I don't have any special knowledge of that.
Because there are publications
yes.
where I read that
yes.
The intelligence agency had the
Right.
promise.
I could have added that to this list.
And
Yeah.
the promise software allow to access to information suddenly. Thank you very
Yeah.
much. Can you tell? Yes, so we can registrate what you tell.
Say it again. What?
Hello?
I have not investigated Promise software. That's
great.
the answer. But I think there was you said you had 4 questions. I've answered 3 so far. I must have missed one.
See. It is possible to find the stock investors responsible of insider trading of September 11. Yes.
Yeah, I answered yes to that.
It exists the possibility to establish that purchasing of put option before September was insider trading and not a simple speculation. Which
Well, I've been basically saying that there is so much evidence of insider trading before 9/11 that it's an extremely low probability. Everything is probabilistic, but it's extremely low probability that it's done on a random basis.
Another note, if you analyze the case of share trading of Amir Ibrahim El-Jindi, this is a criminal case that was yes in the court of Florida. Amir Ibrahim El-Jindi was a consultant who was accused to have tried to sell on September 10 shares for $300,000. He utilized the information coming from intelligence. Have you heard about this case?
Is that the one of the company? He's the CEO of the company, Securitas. Not that one.
El-Jindi. No, he's a consultant.
I have heard of it, but I didn't specialize in thinking it through for this presentation.
Should be interesting to read the document of this trial. Yes, because he was accused of them. We have the only case of trial against insider trading. Insider trading. Yes,
I leave it to your judgment.
Thank you, Judge.
Thank you,
Professor Johnson.
Thank you, Professor, for making very clear some very complicated concepts. You've done a wonderful job. What comes out of this is a desire to find out who did these insider tradings, if they were. I assume that it is possible for the SEC to trace these transactions, and they have done that perhaps for the UAL and for American Airlines. Do we know who purchased those put options, how much profit they made, and did they actually claim the profit in the end?
The answer to how much is in this table. Okay? The answer to whether they claimed it, because there has been, this is the kind of stuff that, frankly, kind of nonsense that goes on out there. Somebody out there says there's unclaimed transactions, okay? But it turns out that the person had said it before the closing date of the expiration, okay? So one of the things, I love this paper by Chesney. I can hand it to you right now because I have, but they look at how many days it took to execute all the put options after September 11th. And every single one of the cases they have here, all 37 cases, or at least for sure all these cases, all of them were executed before the expiration date. There was no unclaimed nonsense going on. Okay.
Professor Lee.
I have a couple of questions on methodology. I'm glad you've got this slide up. Were these 14 entities chosen in advance, or were they generated because they had the most conspicuous statistical anomalies?
Well, Well, I never ask them that, but I'm sure they're not random. I mean, it's not just they happen to do this. These companies.
So he didn't say, well, what would be the company's most
wait a
likely
minute.
to be-
I should
Yeah.
clarify my answer a little bit. The first paper he did was on 9/11. I mean, the first draft. I'm looking at. I copied the draft 4 years ago, and I noticed that it's only on 9/11. He expands the paper to go way beyond 9/11 subsequently, and he's now expanding it even further. Okay, so the answer to the question is surely it was targeted around companies that might be at 9/11. It's stake around 9/11. But it's not only that. I mean, he looks at, for example, at tobacco companies. He finds out, for example, there's a spike in put option trading, and I'm not sure if it's Reynolds, but a few days before they get prosecuted and eventually have a huge losses that the tobacco company is going to experience as a result of the prosecution. There's a spike in put option trading on Reynolds. I think it's Reynolds. Anyway, it's a tobacco company. Same thing he refers to the German airline manufacturer, the one that's in Toulouse. You know what I mean?
Right.
Airbus, right?
Airbus.
So there was something around Airbus, and he finds that there was a spike in insider trading on Airbus shortly before something was going to happen in Airbus. That's the kind of thing I was talking about. A real event occurs after these spikes.
So that was going to be my next question. You said 37 events. 33 can be identified with a real event, 4 do not. And so with those two questions. One, among the 33, is 9/11 among those real events?
Of course.
Okay. And
I mean, that's 13 of 13. These are the 13. These are the 13 right on the screen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. What about the 4 that do where there's dramatic changes, dramatic evidence,
Okay.
but there's no
I'm
real
glad.
event?
I'm glad you asked that, because this is what statistic is about. Ought to be about. If it's random, if there is random things happening, whatever, okay, then there always are going to be spikes. I mean, that's part of, it happens. That's it.
Mhm.
On a random basis, okay? So those 4 that are not explainable is part of what statistics tells you is going to happen, okay? I should make one comment. Now I'm speaking for myself, okay? Because I talked to Chesney on the phone, and I am more convinced of the importance of his scientific results than maybe. I'm not trying to say that he disagrees with me. That's not what I'm trying to say. What he told me that yes, we should now investigate every single one of those companies. Not just American United, but he said it in a kind of a way which this is supposed to be the opener to the investigation, rather than myself believing this is the investigation. Okay, if you understand the distinction. Okay, it's okay.
Professor Jenkins?
Going back to Tushman's paper, I would be, perhaps naively, but I would be virtually completely convinced that some inside trading is going on based on foreknowledge. If you could show me that the spikes for United Airlines and for American Airlines were not accompanied by spikes for Delta Airlines or other airlines not involved in the 9/11 day, why don't we get the selective data? Now, perhaps what Chesney has done, but I can't read this Chesney slide quickly enough to see it.
Delta is up there, actually.
But let's go back to Tushman. Wouldn't that additional information be very, very convincing that insider trading is going on if it's specific to the airlines involved in 9/11, not to other airlines? I mean,
I'm not 100% understanding. I hear what you say, but I'm not.
The foreknowledge presumably could have been so specific that these people, that somebody knew that the towers were going to be hit by United Airlines and American Airlines planes, and the Pentagon was going to be hit by an American plane, and so on. Well, if that's so, then other airlines should be exempt from this spike in trading. So let's get the selective data for the airlines involved and compare it with the airlines not
But
involved.
that's kind of what Chesney is doing, and as I say, he has expanded work beyond this. But be careful what you're saying here, okay? Because Wong, and I think appropriately says, look, if I know what's going to happen to American and United ahead of time, I mean, Paul Zarembka knows that 9/11 is going to happen, and I go into the market and buy put options on 9/11. I mean, I'm getting really, I'm exposing myself to insider trading. So am I likely going to do that? Wong says, no, I'm going to go to the S&P 500 where it's the skies. Or somebody else might say, well, we know that if the American and United tank, okay, then Delta is going to tank, or KLM, or something else. In other words, there's something else, other things that are not so. I can explain that away. If anybody ever asks me, I can explain my activity away. Precisely your question is what I will think twice about before I go to American and United.
Yes, but the spikes were there for United and American.
And
so if they were not disguising themselves. They did rush to put the put options on those two airlines.
And I addressed what the government found out about those two stocks, but I pushed the contradiction one step further, okay, and said, nevertheless, those were the last day, the trading day before September 11th, and Sarnoff, advising his clients, could have been following what he sees is going on. This is a complicated topic. I mean, I want to say, I haven't said this yet. There's lots of advisors out there. They're making recommendations all the time, okay? That's part of the probabilistic thing, that's going on. I mean, and most of clients don't follow their advisors. I mean, they just, it's a piece of paper. They don't even get it in time or whatever. So like 2.5% did it in this particular case, okay? But, there's confidential advisory, so you don't even know there's people making advice on a private basis that you don't even have a subscriber list for.
Well,
I don't know what more to say.
Perhaps we'll let that hang for the time being, and we'll
Professor
Lee, and then we have time for one more question after
Professor Lee. Let me jump
Lee.
in here. It's 2011. There's 10 years have passed. There is easily obtainable information about who made a bundle on the days leading up to 9/11, but that's not out there. And we're living in the era of Bernard Madoff. We're living in the era of where Harry Markopolos went to the Securities Exchange Commission in 1999 with clear evidence of financial wrongdoing on the part of Madoff, and it was ignored for, I think, 9 years. And so don't you think there's some kind of layers and upon layers of complicity and cover-ups that would make this, that could be we could be seeing stonewalling for another 10 years?
Absolutely. I mean, that's exactly what I'm thinking to myself. Okay, you say you have 40 guys making these investigations, and some of them is looking at Germany and doing this, doing that, short selling and whatever else they're doing. But I don't know how many people were looking at put option trading. They don't tell us, okay? But I'm thinking to myself, okay, you're over here, okay, and you're one of the guys, and you say, well, that Boeing stuff, that looks pretty, whatever. I don't think I'm gonna, I'm not gonna. I don't want to put the finger on those guys. Whoever it is, I'm not. I mean, putting the finger on the guys, if I'm talking about if they actually did the investigation, okay, if they actually looked at who purchased the huge, options on August 29th, September 5th, and 6th, you find out the names of the guys who did it, okay. And you can say back there, I'm not going to finger those guys for whatever reason. There's 1,000 reasons why you might want to finger them, okay? And who's to know?
One more question, gentlemen. Is there are we good? It looks like we're good. That concludes then the panelists questioning.